Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for Webinar Wednesday. My name is Dr. Hilda Billups, and I currently serve as the chair of webinars for TACUSPA. You will notice we have changed the format for this webinar just a bit. This webinar is a meeting of our book club. We're reading the book, Cultivating Trauma-Informed Practice in Student Affairs by Dr. Tricia R. Shalka. In this webinar, we will discuss Chapter 2, what it might be like for a college student to experience trauma. Dr. Hope Pamplin is our facilitator for today's book club. Dr. Pamplin is a dynamic educator and leader with over 20 years of experience in both K-12 and higher education. A native of Austin, Texas, Dr. Pamplin earned her undergraduate degree at McMurray University, followed by a master's degree in counseling and a PhD in educational leadership from Prairie View A&M University. Dr. Pamplin is a licensed professional counselor, certified teacher, school counselor, administrator, and trained mediator. Her work has always been guided by a deep commitment to supporting students, recognizing the vital connection between emotional and behavioral health and academic success. Currently serving as the director of Accessible Education Center at the University of Houston, downtown, she has played an instrumental role in advocating for accessibility and mental health resources for the university's 14,000 student population. Beyond her university work, Dr. Pamplin is the founder of the nonprofit Windows of Hope Houston, and she also owns a private behavioral health practice. She is an accomplished author, having written several counseling manuals and a mental health processing journal. Dr. Pamplin's passion lies in creating meaningful change in the lives of the students, colleagues, and communities she serves. We are very thankful and excited to have Dr. Pamplin serve as our facilitator for this book club discussion today, and I will now turn it over to her.
Good evening, well, afternoon, not evening, because it's not night yet, but good afternoon. Just wave. If you're going to stay on mute, just wave. Okay. So we're going to look at Chapter 2 of this text, and I want it to be a very interactive conversation. Initially, I thought that I was going to provide some questions and put people in breakout rooms and do all of the things. But then I started thinking, some of the information is information, yes, we can share together. And that it would be very helpful because at the last meeting, there was a question that ended the conversation. And it basically was, now what do we do with this? What do we do with the information of knowing that we understand what the word trauma means, and we understand that our students are coming to us with trauma? Now, as a practitioner, what do I do with that? Because I too am an individual that may have trauma. And when I'm thinking about trauma, I'm just not thinking about the student. I want you to think about staff and faculty along with the students. And so you have a number of people that have multiple experiences. And because I'm a clinician and trauma is my thing, I loved reading this because I recognize that a lot of the things that I've think about, have to do with trauma. And so everyone's frame of reference is a little bit different when they come into a space dealing with student success. And so what does success look like? What does success mean? And what does that mean when I come in with my own little baggage, with my own frame of reference? And how do I interact with others that have their own baggage and their own frame of reference? So that kind of takes us to the first thought that I want us to kind of discuss. External forces. What does that mean and what does that look like for you and for your students? When you are reading the text or going over what that looks like, what does external forces mean?
I'll chime in on that. Hello, I'm Ashley Thibodeau here at Lamar University.
Ashley.
So I kind of see it on both ends because here at Lamar, I'm staff, but I have taught before, and whether it's teaching face-to-face or online with students, a lot of these external forces are already like systemic situations that students experience themselves. So I find that like, especially with the students I am seeing, they're getting younger and younger, I find. Because yeah, we do have a lot of adult learners, yes, but there's a lot more younger students kind of coming into these universities and especially community colleges. And with that come these bits of trauma and then trauma responses that they enact that sometimes I find can kind of blow it a little bit more so when they enter college or university. So there is that kind of environment set up for them to still experience those external traumas. And that could mean things like financial situations, having to account for every penny that they are putting towards their education and just staying alive in general. It could be emotional trauma. So having to kind of fight this feeling and notion that I'm not good enough to be here, or just a lot of those, negative thoughts about how am I going to succeed if no one else believes in me. It could be things like just, well, the survival aspect of, adulthood. So again, kind of mentioning how there are younger students coming in, but a lot of them now are having to rely on themselves at a lot younger age. And so how does that look for them and how can they kind of keep themselves alive, but also attending to school? So it's just a lot of different external factors I find that are being put on our younger students, especially since, you know, they want to get their education, and how do we help them with that when they bring this with them?
Okay, so actually you mentioned the admittance and entering of students entering college at a earlier age. So that could be early college, things of that nature, dual credit. So you have students that are coming to a institution, whether it's a 4-year or 2-year institution, that may be a lot younger than what they would have been before. And so if I'm thinking about in a person that has a 2-year degree from a community college with early college, and they go to college. And so
Mhm.
now they are a junior with individuals who are 2 years, 2.5 years older than them, at least, if they did the traditional route. And they graduate earlier without having all of the experiences that
Yeah,
one would have. And they get to college, and what the text indicated was, and as we know, you get to college and you're exploring.
yeah,
Oh, I'm here alone, so I can learn about my likes and my dislikes. I can decide if I'm going to go to church on Sunday morning by myself, or if I'm really not going to go to church on Sunday morning, because my mom used to make me go to church every Sunday. And so all of those things are things that college students are grappling with.
mhm,
But given the fact that they are still they're still young, they may not have the maturity level that someone else may have to say, okay, I can gauge my feelings, my emotions with actually learning who I am.
yeah. I think that's a really excellent way of putting it too, because I know for me, kind of like again, the expectation I had when I first started teaching was, I have to treat these students like they're adults because they're adult learners, but then you have to redefine what that kind of like expectation is, because for dual credit students, they're still in high school and they're doing things as a high school student, but they get this opportunity to learn at a college level, but then that also has another set of expectations that they have to manage. And that could also cause more trauma or a new type of trauma, because now they're going to have those high levels of expectations. And for the high achievers, they're going to want to keep having like the A grades or the hundreds that they're expecting, but they may not always get. So that's a really good point to bring up about that maturity level and managing it.
I think when I have spoken to parents before simply about the benefits and maybe not benefits or issues that come along with early college, that parents understand you may want your child to get 2 degrees, but if they're not ready for the degree, or if they're just getting the degree because you want them to get the degree, you're going to be doing harm to your students because financial aid is impacted.
Yep.
They can't transfer with a GPA that's under a certain amount. And so then you are looking at their future that's impacted. And so really understanding all of the things that could play a role in a child not being ready And then we add trauma on top of you graduate from high school, but you can't go to college anywhere you wanted to go because you now have a GPA that's under a 2.0 and your financial aid is impacted. And so I think that a lot of that we don't say and we don't kind of tell parents about. They just think, okay, the great opportunity, but they don't think about the other things as well.
Yeah, and there's that thought process too of when our students are starting to experience that, again, if they're still high school students, do they go to their high school counselor? Do they talk to their parents? But are their parents available to have these conversations? Because they may be first gen students and their parents won't understand what they're experiencing as it is. So then they kind of feel like, oh, I need to find a community of others who are in this boat, which tends to be their class anyway, their cohort. But again, not all students in the cohort are at that same level of maturity.
Okay, so you mentioned first gen, and so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna flip to privilege versus obsession. That I'm kind of going in the book
Yeah.
structurally, kind of, but I want to strategically talk about these things so that we can end with some things that we can take and put in our tool belt as practitioners in higher ed that we can use to really effectuate change in our students, and not just with our students, because for me, and I will say it until I can't say it anymore, creating a culture of care for those around you is not limited to students. A culture of care is still important for faculty, is still important for staff. Staff needs to know that they're cared for. And if I am a leader and I'm pouring into my staff then effectuate change with my students. I may not interact with my students all day, but my staff do on a regular basis. And so if I'm pouring into them, how they show up looks a whole lot different than someone who doesn't feel cared for. Does that make sense?
Yes, that
And
does.
so also recognizing that those traumas um, look different as you lead and they look different as you support individuals in their um, in their higher ed experience.
Mhm.
So privilege versus oppression. How do we witness this in higher ed? And you mentioned one thing in with the first gen, but how do we witness this in higher ed? Anyone else want to share? I'm gonna give Ashley a second to process. Anyone else want to share? That's a no. Okay. So according to the text, um, privilege and oppression can be a number of things, not just racism, but all of the isms, sexism, ableism. So I'm just going to take disability services or the accessibility service center. That could be a privilege and oppression situation for a student coming in understanding that I'm different and I have to identify as different, and I basically stick out, and because I stick out I don't necessarily have a space or a place. But again, if we're creating a culture of care, that changes how I feel about my situation. Also, if there is a community, if I have a community, not just a community that is in the ability services or the disability services space, but a community that cares for me. And that may be a cohort model. That may mean that there is when I was in school a long time ago, we did orientation and you had groups of individuals for your orientation. I kept up with my orientation group the entire time I was in college because I bonded with those individuals and it was a sense of community. And so I think that there are small little nuggets that we could take away from building a sense of community. And I think now more than anything, people are starting to see that having a community is essential. And because COVID happened, and now people are on their phones, on their devices, and it's part of what they do, you think students don't know how to interact with one another, or that they may be diagnosed with a disability because surely you look at people when you talk to them. If you don't look at people when you talk to them, then something's wrong. Or when you don't know how to articulate, it may not be anything wrong. It may be because you don't have skills. And so teaching those soft skills in a way that isn't demeaning, but a way for students to understand it's important for you to know how to do these things. And so maybe having a game night where everybody puts their phone in a basket or lock it up, and then we're actually playing Uno, or we're actually doing the things that we need to do to build community. But for many people that were in college years ago, you would go to the lobby and everybody would be playing cards, to be playing dominoes, to be playing whatever game it was that they were playing, but you were building some type of community. And so when you're talking about village, having a oppression or a privilege, understanding that you in a culture and in a space where you can belong, and that's in the latter end of the book. But I think that having culture and having a sense of belonging is important and essential for those who need or feel oppression. Okay. Questions, thoughts, concerns? Miss Marla, you're shaking your head. Tell me what you're thinking. You're on mute.
Okay.
Tell me what you're thinking. I hear you now.
I was just thinking about privilege and as yeah, as a middle-class white woman, um walking into situations where the students that I dealt with were severely impoverished. And it was, they had a lot of trauma. There were some people that would talk about their own trauma, like white teachers, that I always kind of that they felt traumatized in these situations. And I always thought that was kind of bizarre. But yeah, that gaining that acceptance when you are on the side of privilege
Mm-hmm.
and working with those students that have trauma, and it's just incredibly difficult. And I think they don't do a whole lot to prepare teachers for that walking into the classroom. And I wish that they did. In fact, this book would be wonderful for teachers to read.
Okay, I have questions.
Yes.
Because this is a book club. And so in book club, when I go to a book club, we discuss. We put everything out and we just discuss. And so if I have the honor of doing that, which I do, because Dr. Billups gave it to me this morning when she said my name and all the things. So let's talk, because I think that's interesting, and I think that's very I think that's a good point to make. What you said was, I don't have the same trauma. I don't see through the same lens, but I do have the ability to empathize, but to make a difference with those that I serve. Did
And
I
I
hear
think
you
in
right?
this chapter in particular, and it talked about, we may not be able to walk in their shoes, but
Mm-hmm.
we can listen to their story and we can accept their truth.
Right. And
And
so
that's a big thing, a huge thing. Yeah.
so tell me what you mean by, and how it resonated with you, not walking in their shoes, but accepting their truth. Like
Mhm.
what does that look like to you?
Um, the I grew up in a family with, mom and dad, grandparents on both sides, siblings, and my students, many of them, their parents were in prison or they did not know where they were. They're living with their own grandparents or an aunt or uncle. And, that's something that you just, the only thing I could do was listen to them tell me about what that experience is like for them. And to say, I hear you, I see you. But as far as being able to, um, say truthfully, I understand your trauma. No, 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 no. And I don't think that was necessary, but just to be there and to hear it and to accept it and to be someone that they could come to and talk to. Um, but I think to say that we understand it from someone in my position, that would just be a lie. And I would think kind of hurtful too, because how can you? I can't
You
understand.
can't.
No.
Right. But I think that, and I guess to reframe,
Mm-hmm.
so if I am a individual that may not have had these things, I may feel abandoned, right? Just because I may have had two parents in my home doesn't mean I didn't experience that. That doesn't mean it's the same, but that may mean that you can take that and empathize. I
Mm-hmm.
felt abandoned when XYZ happened. And that
Yeah.
doesn't mean you say it, but I think that that's a point to go back and kind of, I can't
Mm-hmm.
even imagine not having that and this minute thing that I felt, and it must be magnified in this way. And so all I can do is show love and show grace here, not
Right.
pity, but I can show love, grace, and respect and keep it moving, because at the end of the day, I don't need you to pity me. I need you to teach me so that I can prepare myself to get out of the situation I'm in.
And that's a hard thing for some people to understand too, is not pitying, not feeling sorry for other people. Um, and we would see that quite a bit, that, they would feel sorry for them and trying to, like, it's demeaning,
Mhm.
it's insulting. You're, why not just be supportive and point out all the good things that they're doing, or that you see them living their life and being strong and doing all these things, not, oh God, I'm so sorry this all happened to you. Yeah.
Emily, you popped up, so you must have something to say. I'm listening.
So I I taught, I mean, Marla knows this because obviously we all work really close in the same hallway, but I taught second grade. I've taught first, second, third. Obviously I don't teach, I work at Lamar now with all these lovely ladies. But I taught first, second, and third grade in public education for about 7 years. I taught second grade the most. Um, and I've typically only ever taught at Title I schools. And so I specifically taught at really rough schools. That's just what I felt called to do. Um, and my first ever year of teaching, I taught at a very pretty rough school where the majority of the second grade students that I had, their students or their parents were either incarcerated or just simply not around. And I was not, as a baby teacher, prepared for that at all. They prepared me for writing 30-page lesson plans that I have never written in my life as an actual teacher, but they did not prepare me to actually teach students and children with severe emotional trauma and how to be a successful adult and teacher for those types of students, and to help them in the best way that I could. Because in my opinion, that's what educators need more than anything. I can take any class on how to write a lesson plan, how to accommodate for any type of student. I can figure that out. You gave me those tools, but I didn't get the tools that I needed on how to carry that emotional toll, because it's a very mentally taxing job as it is. Add that to having a very emotionally and it was very rough. And I'm 22, or I was at the time, obviously 22, 23.
it's a lot, and you don't know the right things to say, what's going to make it better, what's going to make it worse. You're trying to just be a teacher in the sense of all of that as well.
Do you
And
feel like you had support to ask
no,
the questions?
no, not at all. Not at that school. Absolutely not.
Okay, so I'm gonna not pause, but I want to, because I too have K-12 experiences, and my experiences are not different than yours. Um, but probably what I did and my mindset was a little bit different. Um, so my question now is, in higher ed, those same kids that you were teaching are the same students that you're seeing. So you may not have been prepared at 22, but what are we doing right now in higher ed to interact and interface with the kids that the smaller kids that have become growner or grown-ups now in higher ed? But I'm gonna get back. I'm asking that, but I'm gonna go back to K-12 in just a second. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I just had to figure it out on my own, unfortunately, which was pretty much what I had to do if I'm being honest, the majority of my education career. Not now at Lamar, which I'm very thankful for. I have a great group of colleagues that I can go to and pretty much bother about anything, which is great. And they're always really helpful. But throughout my time in education, I really just had to figure it out. And honestly, as a in K through 12 and at a college level, I really had to think, if I was this child, what would I want my teacher to say? What would I want, my teacher to say? Or what would I want, in this aspect, what would I want this person to say? How would I want this person to handle it? What would I want this response to be? So kind of just looking at it through their eyes in a very empathetic lens, but also still keeping that like quote unquote teacher hat on. And in this position, keeping that program coordinator hat on of like, yes, I still have a job to do, but they're still coming from a traumatic lens, and I still need to serve them in that sense and make sure that they are healing before I address like my concern or whatever. Like I can't address my concern if they are like hurting so deeply in the background, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So what I heard you say was, it's important as a practitioner to gather and rally support. So no matter if it's K-12 or no matter if it's higher ed,
Yeah.
it's important to have individuals around you who you can bounce ideas off of, who you can consult with, who you can talk to say, I don't know how to deal with this. I've never had it before. What are your thoughts? Is that what I heard you say?
I mean, yeah, kind of. I think that when those students come to me, it's all about like analyzing the situation, analyzing what the situation is, and then coming to them and responding to them with empathy while still making sure that I'm responding to them in a way that is respectful and acknowledging their situation, as well as not debating it, but like going to my colleagues as well, because they have more experience than I do with this.
And so, as you can see, I'm asking the questions, but I'm also interjecting tips, tools that you can use and put in your tool belt, because this book is great if it's just a read, but if we don't do anything with the read and discuss how we can, as practitioners, realistically make a change and effectuate change in our students, then we're doing the book club and ourselves a disservice. And so when I'm asking those pointed questions, it's because I want you to be able to put some tools in your tool belt.
Right.
So I'm gonna go back to K-12 just because I am a education geek in real life. Like, I loved, if I could teaching and counseling, if I could do those things for free, I would do them. And that's what I would do forever and ever and ever. And one day that will be the case. That's all I would do forever and ever. And so, yes, you do have to address the issue and the concern, But sometimes that's difficult to do because I cannot address the fact that, I mean, I used to have snacks in my office, I mean, in my room, and I created a snack time because I know everybody didn't have food. And
Yeah.
so at a certain time of the day, they got a little bit of breakfast, but I know you didn't eat last night. And so the people that could bring snacks brought snacks, but the other kids, they already knew Miss Pamplin has a drawer and she went to the store. And so I'm gonna get a snack. And so they would go get their snack and everybody would have a snack. But there are things that we can do. Like I can feed my babies when they are in my sight, and they became my babies, and they acted like me. All of the things they were a mirror of me, and so they were like, your kids were in the hallway, they had a smart mouth. I wonder where they got that from. It would be me. But I just think that there's some things we can do and we can control, but there's some things that we can't control, and all you can do is really love on your kids. And that's all we can do with the students that we have here is love on them. But what that looks like is going to be different for every single student. And so you said something earlier, Emily, about I would think about how I would react, but how you would react is going to be different than how they would react based on their frame of reference. And so sometimes we have to, yes, that's empathetic, but we have to be mindful and sometimes just ask, I don't know how to respond right now. So tell me what you're thinking and how you would want me to respond in this moment. And they may say, I don't know. Well, we don't know together. So we're going to figure something out. And so just kind of allowing them, and sometimes because of the trauma, they've never been asked. They've never been empowered. And so sometimes even providing them with the ability to say yes or no to a situation, or I feel this way, or I think this way, can be very daunting because I've never had the opportunity because no one ever asked me before. And so that's a whole nother unraveling of identity. I don't know who I am because I've always been told who I was. And so I get to college, and so now you're asking me what I think and how I want to be or what's going on, and I have no clue. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Ashley, I see your wheels turning. What are you thinking?
Okay, so this, and this is something that I have observed as a college student myself, and then now being an educator, it's still kind of like the same thought process. So this really ties into, again, like they're getting younger, like the students are getting younger in my eyes. And because of that, they're coming into college and then now they're being told, okay, you need to pick a major and you need to stick with it. But then now, like we have services that say, if you do have those thoughts of, well, what if I need to change it because now I'm seeing that's not my path? Sometimes, like in other departments, there's this stigma of, well, you've already taken like your core classes and now you've taken a couple of your major classes. Like, why would you want to do that? Like, it's that questioning aspect of, why would you want to make that decision? But then we have our services where we're supporting them and saying, this might happen. Like, you might ask yourself, I probably need to change my major because this is not what I expected, or I just got older and my interests are different because I'm still learning the world around me and I'm learning who I am. And so to me, it's like I there's always that feeling of I want to make sure I say this in the right way to the students because I know from other parts of campus or wherever they're going to feel like, well, I don't feel like I'm comfortable or empowered to do that.
Okay, so I love this conversation, by the way. Thank y'all. So what I'm hearing you say is and not that you're stuck on it, but it's been resonated in your mind that they're coming younger. And because they're coming younger, they don't have any decision-making skills and it's killing me. And I get that. But I also recognize that because students don't know who they are, they've been told what to do. They get to campus and they're not fully vetted or vested. And so I tell students all the time, do not come to me and tell me you're taking your basics. Because what's a basic? Your mama who's never been to school told you to take math, science, and English. but you're trying to be a nurse. You need prerequisites. You don't need basics, or you need a core curriculum before you transfer and do these other things. And so those are conversations to also have, because you came here to do something because your mama and them said you need to go to school and get that degree.
Right.
That's absolutely correct. Great. Get a degree. But don't get a degree and not do anything with it, or get a degree that you can't do anything with. So what are you going to do with sociology? You going to go to grad school? Because that's what we're going to have to do with it. But you just think you have to go to school to get a degree, and then after you get this degree, you're going to get a job when you leave. And those conversations may not be happening in advising, because I also heard, actually, when you were saying that, the first thing that I thought about was it's some incongruency with advising and what's really going on in a student's life.
Yes.
And so if we're looking at numbers, I need to get students in to matriculate, to retain, and to graduate. It's because I want to make sure that I have funding, and we want funding to be there, but we also want our students, because they're not just numbers to us, we want our students individually to be successful, because each one of them make a difference. And so what I'm hearing you say is, I'm looking at my students one by one and saying, baby, you took natural sciences and microbiology and you want to be an artist. Why did you do that? And so those things make a difference, but they need to be conversations had on the front end.
Yeah, to me, it's very much the timing, because sometimes in our department we do talk about timing, like how it's so important that whatever information we're trying to give to the students is done so intentionally, and when they're being given it. So in our case, we have new student orientation that we prepare for. So we have our last two tomorrow and then Saturday. And so these are our last group of first year students who are coming to campus, and they're getting all of their materials and their registration done. And so, we ask ourselves, like, what is the information that needs to be presented, and reasonably so, and that's appropriate to be presented now, and then versus like when they start their first day of class. And sometimes it feels like a lot of that is put on us to make sure all this information is kind of given, but because we know what services we provide anyway, we can do that. But like for other departments or other colleges, it's like they're lacking in that, and then students then have to kind of wonder, you know, with this degree plan, for instance, some have 120 credit hours they have to complete, others have 129 hours to complete, and they're never really thinking about that because those conversations aren't being had. Or that's what I've been observing.
So as a practitioner, what can you do to get in front of that? Or what conversations should be had, or who should be having those conversations?
So fortunately, we have a transition program that I'm overseeing. And so, and Emily's the program coordinator for said program. And because these are for our first year students, that information I mentioned about like the credit hours and the degree plan, that will be given to them. It'll be given to them through mentors who are going to show them that, okay, this is where you go to access your degree plan. And then based on what degree plan you've already selected, let's pull it up together. And then let's look at it bit by bit, how many credit hours you're gonna have to take each semester, each year, till you get to your final credit hours that you've earned. And is this something that you're expecting to complete, or does this not fit well with what you want to do with your career?
So I bet you didn't think that you were going to be talking about this in a book club about trauma-informed practices in higher ed. But I want you to recognize that everything that you're doing as it relates to informing students, leading with empathy, showing care and concern to both staff and to faculty and to students, is a practice that's needed in order to make sure that we are leading with love, building a culture of care, so that we can inform and effectuate change in students that have trauma. Of course, we have resources, and we're going to always have hopefully we will always have resources that students can tap into, whether that's the counseling services, whether that is they need accessible education, whether that's tutoring services, all of those things, because we may think, she said tutoring services. I did, because if you come in and you know that you're at a deficit and the student's at a deficit educationally, that trauma is not going to correct itself if there is not an intervention. So there has to be some type of intervention. And if that intervention needs to be academic intervention, we need to do that up front. If that is a behavioral intervention, then that's therapy. If that is some type of intervention where accommodations are needed, then that's another realm. But again, from K-12, response to intervention, everything that was done in K-12 is a wash and repeat for higher education. And so when we talk about response to intervention, or RTI, we are looking at what we're trying to do now in higher ed, trying to get students before they get to the place where they're failing and provide them all of the interventions. Well, that was done a long, long time ago in K-12. And so many of you who have been in K-12 or seen that realm know how to do it in higher ed, and so can do it and do it well. And so providing those interventions up front before you even see the need for the intervention, or having caseloads and actually having relationships with students. And so we talked about identity. Those relationships matter. And when students come in, the relationships that they hold with other individuals could be a trauma, but the relationship they hold with you could be an help. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Their environment. And I think for something that I wrote down when I was reading was, a community college is hard in this sense. And for us, we're a commuter college. And so we don't have any dorms on our campus or what have you. And so when students come to college and they live in college, they're getting away from what could have been traumatic at home. They're learning about themselves. They're forming a new identity, building community with people around them. When you have a commuter school, you come to school, you go to school, and then you go back home to your trauma. And so you don't have an opportunity to, in real life, be engulfed in a different community or a different environment so that you can see, it's not going to always be this way. So if you're at home and you've been told you're not smart, I don't know why you're going to college, that's a waste of time. And then you come to college and you don't find community because you don't have time, and it's a college and you're going to go back home and you need to get things done, or I need to go to work because we don't have funds. You don't get the benefit of someone who goes to college and can go away and stay in a dormitory and get away.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's important for us to know our students and to know what situations that they're in, and recognize that we can be the change agent, even if that is saying a kind word, again, creating a culture of care, because we're not going to change their environment overnight. We're not going to help them move in 2 days and 2 seconds.
Yeah.
But you can give them a space and a place for them to have community, so that they understand that what they're going home to, if it's traumatic, is not necessarily what they have to continue. And lastly, and I think we've talked about it in this, having a place of belonging, or belonging somewhere. And that's sometimes hard to do when you're at a commuter school or at a community college. But when you're in a four-year institution, that new student orientation, or the fairs that clubs will have, club fairs, to get students involved, to help them with the belonging. Hopefully you have a resident assistant or RA who's keeping an eye on students, who can see who's interactive or in activities or doing things. Those are things that are important. And those are the higher touch points. And if you don't have people in those spaces who really show concern as much as the individuals that may show concern on this call, then it's really difficult to effectuate change. And so really having a culture that understands care and that belonging is important. And at this juncture in college, individuals are still trying to find themselves, and they're coming with trauma. They're coming with baggage. And what we do with that baggage has to be intentional. And we have to allow them to in essence, put down their baggage themselves. We can't take it from them. We have to allow them to put it down. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Questions, thoughts, anything that you in the book that, because I think we went over the book, but if there was anything that you felt like, you know what, this was something that I didn't know and that I want to discuss, go for it. I'm listening.
I wanted to talk about, okay, so those students that have trauma from lack of success in K-12, they had a bad time. They weren't prepared. No one really, they would just sort of pass through the system. A lot of students like that. Well, they end up here. And they end up in our probation program that we're doing a sort of RTI with 3 tiers this fall, and each one more intense. And so, but to get these kids to come to us that are already, they haven't experienced any kind of academic success. Now they're failing here too. But to get them to, metaphorically take our hand and let us kind of help them. And
Okay, so I have questions.
Yes.
Because my thought is, how are you creating a sense of belonging for those individuals?
I
Are
don't.
we? No, I'm saying,
That's so
are
hard.
we?
It is. It's so hard.
Is it? Because we
Mhm.
could, at one organization, we had, at Lone Star, they call it STAR. At HCC, they call it SLIP. But an orientation for individuals, and these are the resources, this is what we're going to do, and then make them do some stops. And these are the expectations that you do. And in essence, you force them to do intervention, not force them, but really kind of say this is a part of the program. Because you are on probation, you're in the program. And so a part of the program is doing these things. And then you put things in place, and then to see if there is a result or an outcome for these things, but you put things that are specific to success.
Yes. And we've argued for having a much more prescriptive approach to this, and that holding them accountable. And so we've kind of mapped all of this out for the fall, and who we're going to work with and which groups are going to do what, and try to think of different things that would be supportive for these students that would help them. And but it comes down to that we can't force them.
We can't,
We
but
just
however,
make
but
it
if I trust you, I'm coming.
Yeah. And that's
So you can build trust with the students that you're interacting with, and you may not get everybody, but building trust is essential.
Yeah.
And you'll see an increase if students trust you, because they'll run through a wall for you if they trust you. And if they trust that you want what's best for them, which in this case would be graduation. But in some cases, what's best for them may mean taking a less courses, or taking this, but that is again in contradiction of what is stated. Okay, this student needs to have this many hours. Well, if they're on probation suspension, they may only need to have 9 hours. They're not going to be full time.
Yeah. And
So what does that look like?
having them retake organic chemistry and, calculus too, let's put them in something where they could be successful, where they could taste a little something, um, to help to motivate. It's so difficult.
Both and.
Hmm.
I would say both and, because if I retake organic chemistry, then my grade is going to be replaced. And so I see
Well,
success on my
yes.
GPA.
Yes.
But if I take a class that I know that I'm going to be successful at, maybe give me it
Mhm.
an elective with this,
Mhm.
so I can see something I'm
Yeah.
good at, and the fact that I'm now going to be required to take 5 tutoring sessions or whatever. Now I'm getting an intervention as well.
Yeah.
So something to think about. It's doable.
Yeah, and it's getting buy-in from the other departments. Because Hilda and I will come up with big plans, and they're like, "Don't y'all think that's a lot?" Well, no, not really.
Well, I always tie it back to completion and money and smile. And if you tie it back to completion, money, and smile and say, well, if we don't have the numbers, then we're not going to be able to make your faculty position in the next 2 years, then things change. But what do I know? All righty. So I think we are wrapping up. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your participations, for your thoughts, for reading the text. And hopefully you got some nuggets of things that you can do moving forward. And because my thought process is, with the book club, you need to come away with some real things you could use with this type of text. So
Thank you so much for joining us today. We'd also like to thank Dr. Hope Pamplin for serving as our discussion facilitator. As we close today, I want to remind you, if you're interested in presenting, serving as a panelist for a future webinar Wednesday, or moderating a future book club meeting, please complete the proposal form. The link will be in the chat. If you're watching the recording of this book club meeting on our YouTube channel, the link will be in the video description. Additionally, the TACUSPA membership year runs from January to December. If you're not yet a member of TACUSPA, we encourage you to join us. Finally, TACUSPA is celebrating our 100th anniversary at our annual conference in Houston, October 1st to the 3rd. Please see our website for conference details. Thank you and have a great day.